ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد، فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله، وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، وشر الأمور محدثاتها، وكل محدثة بدع، وكل بدعة ضلالة، وكل ضلالة في النار. All praise is due to Allah. We laud Him and beseech His help, and in Him we seek forgiveness, and we seek the refuge of Allah from the mischiefness of our souls and the wrongdoings of all of our actions. Wherever Allah guides, no one can lead him astray, and whoever Allah leads to be left astray, no one can guide him. And I bear witness that there is nothing worthy of worship as a deity except Allah. He's alone, He has no partners, and I bear witness that Muhammad is a servant and His messenger. Surely the best speech is the speech of Allah, the book of Allah, the Quran, and the best guidance is the guidance of Muhammad, and the worst of all affairs are newly invented matters. For every newly invented matter is innovation. Every religious innovation is astray, and every astray will lead you directly to the hellfire. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, we are fortunate this evening to have with us a brother who is dear and near to most of us, either directly or indirectly through his writings and his speeches. And before we begin, I'd just like to read a little bit about this particular brother who is visiting us, whose name is Abu Ameenah Bilal Phillips. Brother Bilal was born in Jamaica and grew up in Canada, where he accepted Islam in 1972. He completed a diploma course in the Arabic language in the city of Medina, Saudi Arabia, and went on to obtain a Bachelor of Arts degree in Usul al-Din at the Islamic University of Medina in 1979, and then a Master's of Arts degree in Islamic Theology from the University of Riyadh in Saudi Arabia in 1985. He has taught Islamic education and Arabic language on the junior high and high school levels at the Manara School in Al-Riyadh. He did this from the years of 1979 to 1987. Presently, he is enrolled in the Islamic Studies doctoral program at the University of Wales. Among his books, which are many, by the way, are translations of The Devil's Deception of the Shia, Khomeini, a moderate or fanatic Shia, The Mirage in Iran, Arabic calligraphy and manuscripts, and Ibn Taymiyyah's essay on the Jinn. He has also co-authored Plural Marriage in Islam and authored the Quran, Numerical Miracle, Hoax or Heresy, or Hoax and Heresy, Evolution of the Madhab, which is now revised and called Evolution of Fiqh, Tafsir of Surah Al-Hujurat, the Ansar Cult, and the Fundamentals of Tawheed. And many of us know now that he has two additional books to his credit, which is Islamic Studies, Book 1, and also Salvation Through Repentance. So, without belaboring this lengthy biographical sketch of the brother, inshallah, we will have Sheikh Bilal give us a few comments on the subject, development of the Islamic or Muslim character through the 5 pillars of Islam.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulil Kareem, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man istanna bi sunnati ila yawm ad-din. All praise is due to Allah, and may Allah's peace and blessings be on His last Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and on all those who follow the path of righteousness until the last day. The topic as my brother has mentioned, is the development of Muslim character through the 5 pillars. And this topic is of particular significance to us in North America because of the fact that most of us, or many of us, are either reverts or converts to Islam, or having been born in Muslim families have come to have chosen Islam at a certain point in our life. And the process by which we have learnt Islam tends to be one in which we are bombarded with a body of information, facts. We learn the methodology of certain rites and rituals, and following that we feel that we have now understood what Islam is about, and we are left to live our lives as Muslims. However, the Islamic character, or the character of the Muslim, is something which has not developed in the way that it should, and as such we find, in spite of the large numbers of people who have entered into Islam and the many communities which have sprung up across the country, we find that these communities, for the most part, are not seriously having an impact on the society around them. We find Muslims to be in a state of fragmentation. They come together for Jum'ah or for a lecture or two, but in fact they are fragmented, they live separate lives, and they do not truly represent a community which would display the Muslim character to the community at large, and thereby have a serious impact on the flow of history in the North American continent. So what I'm suggesting is that we need to look at the foundation of Islam once again. This foundation, which is built on the 5 pillars that we're all familiar with, but which has a particular understanding with regard to the characteristics that the Muslim, or one who has accepted those principles, should display. Islam has laid great stress on the development of the Muslim character. In fact, we know the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, was quoted as saying, "Innama bu'ithtu li'utammima makarim al-akhlaq." That is, I was only sent to complete the most noble of character traits. Of course, we know Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was sent for more than that. But in order to emphasize the importance of the development of that Muslim character, he said that this was all that he was sent for. Because in fact, the Muslim character, if it is properly developed, it has all of the qualities necessary for the establishment of Islam on an individual as well as on a community, a national level. And as such, he said, this is all that he was sent for. He has also said, Al-bir husn al-khuluq, that good righteousness, which we understand to be an expression of the pillars of Islam, the pillars of Iman, what Islam has told us to do, what it's told us not to do, avoiding these things and doing what we're supposed to do. This that we would classify as righteousness. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has said that this righteousness is essentially good character. Again, he has taken it out of the realm of the rites and the rituals that we learn, and it has taken it to a level which has to do with the human psyche, the psychology of the Muslim, how he deals with himself, how he deals with the people around him, and his relationship with God. The Muslim character. Now, when we say character, we're talking about, according to the dictionary definition, a combination of qualities or traits that distinguishes an individual or group. A combination of qualities or traits that distinguish an individual or a group. In the case of Islam, we're talking about the qualities and traits which distinguish Muslims from non-Muslims. These qualities are supposed to be permanent qualities, not rites and rituals, acts that we do at some times and we don't do at other times, but expressions of an inner reality. The characteristics of the Muslim are internal. They're not external fundamentally. Of course they must show up externally, but they're coming from an internal reality. They're not an external facade which will change from time or with time and from place to place. If we look at the 5 pillars one at a time, we can see in them guidance in the realm of the development of human Islamic characteristics. The Shahadatan, the declaration of faith and obedience to Allah and His Messenger. This we have recognized to mean that we have committed ourselves to following whatever Allah and His companion, Allah and His Messenger Muhammad ﷺ has commanded of us, and avoiding whatever has been prohibited by them. And this is what we refer to as good, and whatever was prohibited we refer to as evil. And from the perspective of the Shahadatan, we look at all of the events in our lives, the world events, community, society. We view everything from this foundation. However, this foundation, this declaration of faith, it has a purpose. Because Allah does not need for us to declare our faith openly. It is not necessary for Allah to have us say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Because whatever is in our hearts, Allah already knows. So when we are making the declaration of faith, when we come into Islam, or whenever we make that declaration of faith publicly, we are not doing so for the benefit of Allah. We are doing so for the benefit of ourselves. And it is essential that we grasp the benefit that is in the declaration of faith for ourselves. When we make that declaration of faith, what we are in fact saying is to the community at large that we are a part of that brotherhood of faith. We are declaring to the community that we are believers like everyone else. And we're doing so that we may help ourselves in times of weakness. we know that faith is not a continual upsurge where our faith is growing gradually. Every day we can see our faith increasing. No. The faith goes up, it goes down. Goes up, it goes down. We try to struggle to make it going up more than it's going down. But it's not a continual upward flight. So at the times when we are in our lows, when the satanic forces will try their best to cause us to stray from the path, this is the time when we need the brotherhood. So that when the brotherhood sees one of the brothers falling, they will call on them, they will visit them, they will ask them what is happening. What's happening, brother? We don't see you at the masjid. We don't see you in the community events. Your family seems to be separating itself from the community. The concern is there, so that they can help that individual get back up on his feet. And also, so that when individuals in the community are in need, that individual can help them. So, the benefit in the Shahadatan is for the individual who makes a declaration himself or herself. This is why it is necessary, because one who accepts Islam will need the help of Muslims. And one of the best ways is to be known, so that Muslims will be aware of the situation that we are in. At the same time, there is a message to the Muslim who seeks to develop the character of the Muslim in the Shahadatan. And that message is in an open expression, an openness in how the individual deals with his Islam, deals with the various requirements, the rights, the duties, etc. of Islam. He is open about it. Islam encourages an openness. He doesn't hide. He's not secretive. This is what is there in that declaration. We're all made to openly make that declaration, so that this is how we should be in our general character. This is how the Muslim is. He's open. If he sees something wrong with his brother, he doesn't keep it to himself and he tells it to somebody else. He's open. He deals with that. He doesn't hide it. If he's having problems, he comes to his brothers and he speaks about it. He discusses it with his family. He is not secretive. And we find there are other statements in the Quran wherein Allah has emphasized this quality. For example, in Surah An-Nisa, verse 114, we find that Allah saying, لا خير في كثير من نجواهم إلا من أمر بصدقة أو معروف أو إصلاح بين الناس. That is, in most of their secret talks, there is no good. But if one encourages deeds of charity, goodness or conciliation between people, it is in such cases that there is good. But the general approach is that this secret meetings where people get together and talk about this and talk about that, this is disliked in Islam as a general principle. Because for the most part, when people get together and they talk secretively, shaitan gets amongst them and they end up attacking other people. It becomes personal attacks on other people, wherein what comes out of it is not a positive feeling. What comes out of it is a negative feeling towards other members of the community. And we also find the Prophet Muhammad had said on one occasion, when there are 3 people present, 2 should not speak privately to the seclusion of the 3rd. This is again opposing that idea of secretiveness. Why? Because that secretiveness also breeds suspicion. When people are speaking in your presence, secretively amongst themselves, you start to wonder. Shaitan puts the idea in your mind. Maybe they're talking about me or my family or my friends or whatever. This is what comes to mind. almost automatically. So Islam prohibits such behavior and encourages an openness in dealing. What this also points to in terms of the Muslim character is that the individual Muslim is a da'i, or a caller to Islam by nature. That he, because he has the ultimate truth, he does not keep it to himself. He has a duty to express it to the world around him, to his family, to people at his work. Whatever opportunity presents itself, he is involved in da'wah. There is that openness. He spreads the truth. This is also reinforced by a number of verses in the Quran, wherein you find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala either condemning those who hide knowledge, as in the verse وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنْ كَتَمَ شَهَادَةً عِنْدَهُ مِنَ اللَّهِ. There is none worse than one who hides a witness he has received from Allah. Or we find Allah praising those who are involved in da'wah, in spreading the word of Allah. وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِمَّنْ دَعَى إِلَى اللَّهِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا. There is none better than he who calls to Allah and does righteousness. And we find Prophet Muhammad saying, بَلِّغُوا عَنِّي وَلَوْ آيَةً, that we should convey to others around us, even if all we have is one verse from the Quran. Whatever knowledge we have, it is a sin for us to hide that knowledge. When Muslims feel that, then the character of the Muslim in terms of openness and in terms of da'wah becomes something real. It is not something that we get together on one day in the week. We make plans for, we work out beautiful, schemes for da'wah, but we're not living it. We're not living it in our day-to-day practices, whether spoken or whether acted. The da'wah as Islam, we talk about Islam being a way of life. Then da'wah is a way of life. It is a part and parcel of the Muslim character. And openness in dealings with people is also an integral part of the Muslim character. And as I go through the different pillars, I'm only mentioning some aspects of the Muslim character. I'm not attempting here to try to cover all of the aspects of the Muslim character because it is too vast. But this is only to give some kind of thoughts for reflection, that when we look back on the various pillars of Islam, we can try to look back at them with the correct perspective, the perspective which would nourish in us the seeds of the Muslim character. In the case of Salah, wherein we organize our day around the worship of Allah, this is what we have chosen to do. When we have chosen the Salah 5 times a day, we have chosen to make our day a reflection of our purpose. We hold that to be a godly person is an ideal. As such, our lives should be a reflection of it. And that should begin with the very organization of our lives. Non-Muslims, their lives are organized around their material needs. They get up in the morning to prepare themselves to go to work, to feed themselves, provide enough strength to get out and work so they can earn the necessary money to provide for their material needs. They break at midday for the same purpose, lunch. They break in the afternoon, your afternoon break, or it's the end of work, you go home to eat again. So you can get enough, strength, sleep, you get up in the morning, you're ready to go again. So, it's just oiling the machine. Their days are organized around the material goals that they have set for themselves in life. For one who has set his goal or her goal as the worship of Allah, then the day must reflect that. And so the day is organized around the worship of Allah. And Allah has said very clearly in the Quran, أقم الصلاة لذكري, establish the prayer for my remembrance. So we know the prayer is there fundamentally so that we may remember Allah. So that between the periods of prayer we will have a consciousness which would lead us to righteousness. Because it is in the remembrance of Allah that we are righteous. And it is in the forgetfulness of Allah that we become evil. That's the bottom line. When we remember Allah, then we are righteous. When we forget Allah, then we become evil. So we try to organize our day around the worship of Allah, the remembrance of Allah, so that we may live the righteous life for which we were created. Now, this salah, it also has in it a principle for action in our daily lives, in that it is supposed to affect how we conduct ourselves outside of the salah. Allah says in the Quran, إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ تَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنْكَرِ. Very salah prevents evil speech and evil deeds. So we have here a gauge by which we can measure the effectiveness of our salah. To what degree are we in fact making salah? It is supposed to prevent us from evil speech and evil deeds. So if we find that we are praying, we leave the salah and we are cursing, using vile language in our dealings and with the people around us, etc., and we're still, doing in terms of stealing or cheating, etc., actions which are vile actions, then this is a sign to us that the salah that we're making is not the salah which Allah has ordained. What we're doing is just going through the motions. We've got a ritual that we perform, which is not much different from the katas that one may do in karate or judo or something like this. They're just physical rituals that we go through which tone our bodies, keep us relatively healthy. But in terms of what it is Allah had designed in the salah, we've missed it. We've missed it. The salah teaches us that the Muslim, in his speech, he has to control his speech. If he hasn't got good to speak about, then he is silent. As the Prophet Muhammad said, فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ. Either say good, speak good, or be quiet. That's general advice. It also said that if you can guarantee me what's between your two jaws and between your two legs, I will guarantee you paradise. That's telling us that one of the major forces which takes us to hell is our tongue. So, for the Muslim, the true Muslim, the characteristic of good speech is fundamental. And especially in the society around us, where vile speech, is considered admirable. I was reading an article in the one of the newspapers just a day ago. They were talking about Will Smith from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You know, he's a rapper, so he's just put out a new album. And they mentioned in it that, you know, Will now in his new album is using swear words. You know, in his first album it was clean. And they were explaining the rationale, you know, that Will's grown up now, you know, and, you know, some of these words he used, you know, one word which was particularly degrading to women. He said that, you know, that he didn't intend any degradation in it. It was just felt good, you know. So, I mean, it's and of course his album is selling more than the previous album. You know, and this is showing us the value that is placed in the society on vile language. I mean, if we go back some years, I mean, you listen to the dialogue in the movies and in the television and the songs, etc., we find that there's been a vast change, a tremendous change which has taken place. I mean, people are saying, well, this is more real now. You know, these songs, the movies are reflecting our day-to-day lives. But what it's doing is it's reinforcing a vileness of speech which naturally creates vile characters, because the words have meanings and the words affect people. When you're saying it, when you hear it, it's affecting your character. So it's not surprising then when we hear, you know, sometimes I've sat in whilst I'm here in New York or New Jersey, Philadelphia, elsewhere, I've sat in on certain discussions between husband and wives, you know, in family situations where counseling is being given by an imam or, you know, one of the brothers in the community. You know, and in the course, you know, of these discussions, you know, I will see, you know, a sister who is, you know, full hijab and, you know, really looking pious, you know, as far as the outer aspects of Islam goes, you know, and the brother says, well, you know, she called me at this, that, and the other. I said, what? You said that, sister? She said, well, yes. It just seems so inconceivable to put these two things together, you know. And but she said, well, that's what he called me. You know, and the brother is there, you know, dressed down and everything, you know. I said, brother, you said that? He said, well, you know, by accident, you know. Well, I mean, if this is the foundation, this is how, you know, the Muslim male and female interact, then what can we expect from our children? You know, what can we really expect of Islam in our lives? This will also reflect how we deal with the other brothers and sisters in the community. And so you find in the course, when people get heated in arguments, that these words will come out. These kinds of expressions will be heard, even in the masjid. I mean, something as serious as that. You find even in the masjids people raising their voices and using, you know, words which are totally unacceptable. And these are expressions of an un-Islamic character. So these are the signs. These are the signs telling us that although we have accepted the pillars of Islam, we really don't know them. We really don't know what their meaning, their effect is supposed to be. We are only going through the motions. Bad speech also includes backbiting. We have many verses in the Quran, you know, where Allah has said, for example, لا يغتب بعضكم بعضا. Do not backbite each other. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had explained for us what is backbiting, and he said that it was speaking about your brother what he would not like said. And one of the companions even asked him, he said, well, what if what we're saying is true? He said, that's backbiting. And if it weren't true, it would be slander, a much graver sin. But when we sit down to talk, two brothers get together, you find that 90% of the conversation is about so and so, this one and that one, what he's doing and this one. And again, this backbiting, whether we are directly involved in it or we're listening to it, this is a destructive factor in the development of the Muslim character. This is why Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had insisted that we choose good companions. He said that you will be raised on the day of judgment with your friends. He said that the good companion is like the perfume merchant. When you get up from sitting with him, either you're going to smell of perfume because he gave you a bottle of perfume, or at least your clothes will smell of it just from sitting there whilst he opened the bottle. So you will sit, you try to be around the godly, those who remind you of Allah, so that this will help you to develop, help you to remember Allah. You sit around those who speak good, so that will help you to speak good. This is what we need. This is why it's very important that we are vigilant in not only correcting our own speech patterns within our homes, as well as speech patterns with other Muslims. We have to establish, a foundation of good communication in the Muslim community for the Muslim character to develop, to grow, and to develop. In the case of zakah, we find that Muslims are enjoined to share a portion of their wealth with those who are less fortunate. And this is a duty enjoined by Allah, who had decided that some of mankind would be favored over others. Because it is Allah's destiny that some of us are better off than others, He has commanded, He has ordained that those of us who are better off must share some of that wealth with others. Allah has said in the Quran in Surah Nahl, verse 81, وَاللَّهُ فَضَّلَ بَعْضَكُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ فِي الرِّزْقِ. Allah has favored some of you over others in provision. This is a reality. We're not all created equal in that sense. We're created equal in the sense that we're able to find the path of Allah and to worship Allah. But beyond that, in terms of the materials, Allah has favored some of us over others, whether it is in wealth, children, in physical appearance, etc. As such, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had said, do not look to those above you. It is better that you look to those below you, because that will help you to remember Allah's favor on you. It's very easy for us to forget what Allah has favored us with. So we are enjoined not to look to those above us. And it may happen. Although we're enjoined not to look to those above us, it can still happen. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had also said, if any of you looks at a person made superior to him in property and appearance, he should also look to one inferior to him, whom Allah has favored him over. Because in real life, though we're enjoined not to look to those above us, it's going to happen. And it means like in general, we try to avoid it. But when it does happen, what we do is we automatically reflect on one who is below us. So that way, we find contentment in the favors of Allah. And we can possibly then develop the quality of generosity which the zakat is ordained for. It is for our benefit to develop this quality of generosity. A quality which could not be developed if there wasn't that difference. If all of us had the same amount of wealth, then where would the incentive to give come from? There would be no one to give to. So Allah has deliberately made some over others, so that difference will be there. So the test will be there. Our desire will say, no, we don't want to share this. But our commitment to God helps us to overcome that desire and share it. And as such, we start to develop and grow with the spiritual characteristic of generosity, which is fundamental to the Muslim character. I think that we're on the verge of Maghrib. So I will stop at this point and allow those of you who don't have wudu to go ahead and make wudu, and allow for the adhan to take place, and we prepare for salah. Inshallah we'll continue after the salah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.
Assalamu ala Rasulillah. Before we continue, brothers and sisters, I'd just like to mention the format after the Sheikh Bilal has given his lecture, or in the comments. Inshallah, the questions and answers will be of two parts. The first part of the questions and answers will be about the topic. That is, you send up your papers, sisters also from downstairs, you send up your papers with the questions written on them, and these questions will be only pertaining to the topic of developing the Muslim character through the 5 pillars. After we exhaust those questions and answers, then the next part of the questions and answers will be revolving around the books that he has written. That will be the second part of the questions and answers, revolving around the books that he has written, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. All praise due to Allah, and Allah's peace and blessings be on His last messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We were talking about zakah and what it was to develop of the Muslim character. We said, one, it was to develop generosity. And the effects of generosity on the society from a point of view of promoting Islam, it is something whose effects are really immeasurable. I have personally witnessed in Saudi Arabia, in Dammam, I spent about 2.5 months with the troops who were being processed out of the country. And in the particular center where I was, I observed many people accepting Islam. In fact, in that area, over 5,000 American troops accepted Islam. About 70% of them were what we call black Americans, and about 30% were white Americans, males and females. And in the particular center where I was at, matter of fact, 11 chaplains accepted Islam. Alhamdulillah. And what I observed from a number of the people in the course of discussions, concerning, because the center was under the title of a Saudi Arabian cultural information tent, because of course this was right in the midst of the, American processing area, and they would never allow us to set up a tent which said, Islamic Dawah Center or whatever, Although the tent became known as the conversion tent, once the numbers started to, come through. But in the course of discussion, because part of the format of the da'wah in the tent was open discussion where, large groups of people at a time, maybe about 100, 150 people at a time, would just be firing away questions, discussing their experiences, etc. One of the things that a number of them mentioned was the impression of the people's generosity on them. I mean, many of these guys were out on the desert, who didn't come into the cities. They just spent the time out on the desert. And they would see a camel herder come along with his camels or sheep. He would come out at what appeared to be from nowhere. He would set up his tent. And when he spotted them, he would call them over. They would come over and he would light up a little fire and brew some tea or some coffee, offer them some dates. He couldn't speak a word of English and they couldn't speak a word of Arabic. They would just sit there and smile at each other. And it really amazed them how this person, could be that open, that generous to them. It's just something that they had not experienced before in their lives. So one brother told me, he said, man, I've been in Japan, I've been stationed all over. I never met people so generous, so kind. This, and of course, not to say, I'm sure you've had dealings with many other Arabs who don't have these characteristics, but the people on the desert, who tend not to be as influenced by the cultural changes which have happened in societies as in Saudi Arabia, they still display some of that natural generosity which has been inherited, on which has its basis actually in Islam. And this is what we try to explain when they'd ask, why did they do that? We'd explain to them, well, really, Islam enjoins that. This is what Islam teaches, So, and those who are generous are particularly attractive. So, even from a point of view of da'wah, it behooves Muslims to display the kind of generosity which Islam commands. But beyond that display, it is essential that that generosity be a part and parcel of each individual's character. When people come to their home, if they're eating, they invite them to eat. They don't, keep them in the outer room and finish their meal and then come and sit down and talk with them, This is not the Muslim way. This is one thing you find if you go into traditional Muslim societies. Automatically you come in. Whatever food they have, they're going to invite you to come and sit and eat. Because the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had said, what's good for two is good for three. This is the Islamic attitude of sharing. And what this also breeds in the Muslim character is contentment. You see, because a person, for him to share, he has to be contented with what he has. If he feels, I don't have enough, I need more, I got to have more, it's very difficult for him to share what he has. So he has to have a certain level of contentment, which we said that Islam promotes through not looking all the time at those people above us, but looking to those below us, so we can understand Allah's blessings on us and be thankful. And in being thankful, then we will be also willing to share. And that breeds peace. So because we all say and we know that Islam means submission to the will of Allah, and it also means peace. We say this, it comes from the root word, sin lam mim, which essentially means peace. Salam, Islam, all of these are interrelated. But yet, most of us don't have peace in our lives. We're not at peace. Though we're saying that Islam means peace, we're not at peace. And that lack of peace in the character of the individual will be evident in how that individual deals with the people around him, how he deals with his family. That lack of peace. And one big chunk of that peace comes out of contentment. It doesn't mean you don't strive to improve your situation, but when you strive, you depend on Allah. So you don't become frustrated when the things that you have striven for do not come. Because Allah knows what's best. You may seek something and it's not good for you. And you may hate something which is in fact good for you. Allah says that in so many places in the Quran as a reminder to us. So that we may find contentment. And ultimate contentment comes with the remembrance of Allah. Allah bi dhikrillahi tatma'in al-qulub, which the salah is supposed to be developing in us. The remembrance of Allah, and through that remembrance of what Allah has given us, so we become generous, we become content, and our hearts find rest. And this is one of the characteristics which distinguishes the Muslims from the non-Muslims. If we are just as bent on gathering as much of the material world as we can, doing everything that we desire to do, then what really is the difference between us and the non-Muslim? We are displaying the characteristics of the non-Muslim, when in fact the Muslim character, which zakah is a foundation of, has not developed. So again, we go through the ritual of paying yearly an amount of money, but the meaning of that is lost on us. So we don't grow. We just feel grudgingly, we got to do this because Islam says it. Like people grudgingly make salah, the time for salah comes, you feel, if the imam takes too long, why don't he hurry up with his, what is he reading a long surah for, This is the kind of attitude that we tend to approach the salah, get it out of the way as quickly as possible. It's a burden on our back. The zakah is a burden. But in fact, these are releases. These are methods by which we tune ourselves into Allah and find a release from the burdens of our day-to-day lives. So we're supposed to be going into the salah with desire to pray, coming out feeling refreshed, wondering when is the next salah. That's how we're supposed to be going in. Unfortunately, that's not what's happening. So it means in essence that we are practicing rituals, rites, but we are not benefiting from them. And of course, such rites and rituals become a curse for us on the Day of Judgment. Instead of becoming a means of attaining righteous deeds and helping us to get into paradise, they become a curse for us. We will be cursed by them on the Day of Judgment. Fasting, so we know, basically controls the main two drives that the human being has. The most powerful two drives, the drives for food, and connected with food is the material well-being, and sex. So Islam provides a means of putting that into harness, to put it under control, so that the individual can rise above the animal. These desires that we have, we share with the animals. This is not the desire for food and the desire for sex. The animals all have it. Fishes, birds, everybody. But what makes us different is that we also have a soul, and a mind that can choose not to follow those desires, can choose only to fulfill those desires in a mode which has been prescribed by Allah. That's what makes us different. And it is the Muslim, the believer, who gets control of these desires, gets out of fasting that sense of control, which will make him different now from the non-Muslim. So here in this society especially, when he's moving about, the male, and he sees all the nakedness etc. around him, he's not cracking his head from left to right, the way the non-Muslims do, And people will notice that. People will be surprised, What's it about this guy? I mean, are you a homo or something? You don't believe in sex, Now this is an in for you to introduce something of Islam to that individual. This is part of the Muslim character, that he guards his eyes. And to guard his eyes, the idea of guarding his eyes, this is to protect himself sexually. He tries to do different things in life, in his day-to-day life, which minimize the sexuality of his existence. He avoids magazines, which have nakedness in them, movies, television. I'm not saying that he never goes ever to a movie or he never watches television or that, but he would only do so if he could find something which could be classified as halal. Because for a Muslim to sit in front of the television or in front of a movie screen and watch people take off their clothes and do the sexual act, this is despicable. This is prohibited. This is haram. Without a doubt. And if somebody were to tell you to go and peep in that keyhole, to look at those people, you would say, no, peeping is not good. Peeping Tom, this is prohibited. But yet you're going to sit in front of the television or sit in the movie house and watch people do the same thing. No, it's an act. Really, it is no difference in essence. It is haram. And what that does is, when people are involved in watching that type of thing, it maintains a high level of sexuality in their character, in their dealings with people. When they talk to people, they'll be hearing nuances. They'll be seeing in people's eyes, and when they shake hands, or somebody accidentally brushes them, everything that will be happening around them, they'll be reading into it sexuality, because that's what they're about. You see, and that's not the Muslim character. And this is why, for a number of us, when we first went over to the East, for example, and we met Muslims from the East who would want to hold our hands, be pulling our hands away, what is this, because the act of holding hands, it's got sexual connotations, this is part of what is bred in this society, and this is why Islam, enjoins us when we're standing in prayer that we're next to each other. That contact is sex-free, and that's the way we should be able to function. This is the Muslim character. He's not reading sex into everything. And an essential part of that character, on a very basic material level, is that the Muslim, he eats moderately. He's in a society which promotes, the full range of desires as far as food goes, but he controls himself. He avoids eating junk. I cannot say to you, junk food is haram. But the Muslim character would not be involved in junk food. because he knows that his body is something given to him or her by Allah, and as such they have a responsibility to look after that body. So if they know that this is junk, why are they going to put it in their systems? Just because it tastes good. But the thing is that that's what fasting was about, helping to break down that kind of desire to have everything which tastes good. Because eating is not about what tastes good, because there are some things which taste good, like pig, which is haram. There are things which taste good which are harmful to us. So eating is not fundamentally, the pleasure for the pleasure of eating. It is fundamentally for the nourishment of our bodies. The pleasure is a side effect, not the primary. So when we keep the primary factor in terms of eating in mind, then we would naturally avoid much of the junk that is around there, and in doing that we'd also save money. Because when we look in our daily budgets how much we spend on junk, and then we wonder at the end of the month we don't have enough money to make ends meet. But if you add up all that junk food that people eat, they would provide them an extra body of money there. So the Muslim, in his character, he is a moderate eater, and he chooses carefully what he eats or she eats. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had given us a sort of definition of the Muslim character with regards to eating, which separates the believer from the non-believer. He said, إِنَّ الْمُؤْمِنْ يَأْكُلْ مِنْ مِعَنْ وَاحِدٍ وَالْكَافِرْ يَأْكُلْ فِي سَبْعَةِ أَمْعَةٍ. Verily the believer eats from one gut, and the disbeliever from 7. This is a characteristic of the believer. He eats as if he has one stomach, whereas the disbeliever eats as if he has 7. He just goes at it, But the believer is picky, he's choosy. He eats with only his right hand. This is some of the benefits that come out of it, because if you can eat with both hands, then you can be coming from both sides, right? You're drinking and eating at the same time, but now you only have one hand. You got to put it down and you pick up the other one. This helps to slow you down, this is some of the wisdom behind. Of course there's other factors involved, but this is some of the wisdom that is in there. It helps that individual. We are not allowed to blow on the food when it's too hot. Again, when you're just into food, man, you're just going, burnt up, but it's great, tastes good. You're just going at it anyway. The believer, he waits until it cools down, then he eats. These are some of the characteristics. Prophet ﷺ said the believer eats a third, he drinks a third, he leaves a third for breathing. This is part of that character. And as such, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, talking about the signs of the last day, he said, وَيَظْهَرْ فِيهِ مُسْلِمًا, talking about the Muslims, and there will appear amongst them, the Muslims, fat people. We're not talking about fat people who have glandular problems, but it starts to become common amongst the Muslims, because of the wealth and, the indulging in the pleasures of the world, that they're characterized as being fat people. This is one of the warnings from Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. In spite of the societal attitudes towards skinny and fat, etc., Islam does take a particular position on that. And this is what kept the early Muslims vigorous and able to deal with the forces which surrounded them, which were much greater than them, because they were healthy people. They were able to get up as one body and take on the nations around them. They didn't have the arms, the means, they had the faith, and they were physically ready to give their lives. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had also said that the worst thing a man can fill is his stomach. These are all gems of guidance, which distinguishes the believer, again, as I say, when you go sit eating at lunch break with the other non-Muslims around you, there should be a difference in the way that you eat from the way they eat. And if there is, it will become noticeable to them. And they will question, why? And this is again an in for da'wah. However, even in the area of eating, Islam also takes into account need and necessity, circumstances. Because though we should take this moderate attitude towards eating, controlled, yet at the same time the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was reported to have said, إِذَا وُضِعَ الْعَشَاء وَأُقِيمَتِ الصَّلَاةِ فَابْدَأُوا بِالْعَشَاءِ. If supper is served and the iqamah for prayer is made, begin your supper first. People say, well, this is like the opposite. Saying if food comes and the prayer is saying Hayya al-Salah, Hayya al-Falah, come to Salah, come to success, and you're leaving that and eating, this seems to be turning the principle around. But no, this is not the case. The case is that if food is put down in front of you and the iqamah is given, when you get up to try and pray, your mind is not going to be on that salah, your mind is on the food still. So for your salah to be of benefit to you, Islam ordains that it's better you go eat first, then you go and pray. So you remove that from yourself, and then you can stand before Allah and really benefit from your salah. One of the things also that fasting develops in terms of the Muslim character is also patience. Because in gaining control of the desires for food and sex, there is in it patience. Because when you break the fast, this is when now the lessons of the fast are tested. See, most people think that the fast is from the dawn to the sunset. But actually, the lessons of the fast come in before dawn and after sunset. Because if you break the fast with a 3-course meal, then you didn't get the lesson of the fast. When you break the fast, you are supposed to come in to a light meal. So you're gaining patience because your whole system is telling you, feed me, feed me. But you are coming out of that fast gently. This is development of that patience. When you're going into the fast is suhoor, it's supposed to be a light meal. Again, if you eat a 3-course meal so you don't feel hungry all the way through the fast, then you really haven't benefited from this fast. It should be a light meal going in, so that you can experience hunger, you can be involved in struggle, and a light meal coming out. Later on, you can eat some more. But the point is that this is when the patience comes. You are now to put into practice the principles of the fast. Self-control. And of course, patience is something which we know is fundamental to success in this life. We have a whole surah, Surah Al-Asr, wherein patience is given as the essence. After righteous deeds, it is to enjoin each other to be patient. When Allah talks in Surah Al-Baqarah about the tests that will come to us with the loss of life and wealth, He closes the verse by saying, وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ, and give glad tidings to those who are patient. Because it's patience, ultimately, which will get us through this life to paradise. Patience as a result also of faith. Obviously, we're not separating patience from faith. Because this life is a series of tests. It's drawing us to be impatient, and we are created in a state of impatience. We tend to be impatient, but we have to struggle against it and maintain an even keel, control ourselves. As the Prophet ﷺ said, this life for a believer is a prison, and it is paradise for the disbeliever. So this is patience. That's what the prison is, the prison of patience, where we control ourselves. Is this believer, he goes, anything goes. It's your thing, But for the believer, it's a prison set by himself for his own protection. And patience is what carries him through. Hajj, of course, and Umrah underlie the universality of Islam. It teaches that the Muslim character is not nationalistic, is not racialistic, is not tribalistic. This is the message for the Muslim character in Hajj and Umrah. Because he's Muslim now, is meeting Muslims from all over the world. This shows him the universality of Islam in the sense that it's not limited to any one people. But at the same time, it is teaching him that he should, in his day-to-day life, express that universality. That he deals with people as people. He doesn't judge people according to their nationality, their race, or their tribe. He judges people according to their faith or lack of it and their dealings. That's how he judges people. He is an individual who is not an isolationist. He mixes with people. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had said, the believer who mixes with people and bears their harm is better than the believer who does not mix with people and bear their harm. It is better. This is part of the Muslim character. He is social. He doesn't isolate himself. He doesn't cut himself off from the rest of the community. Regardless of what is happening, he has a role to play as a part of that community. But that community has to be a real community. And this is one of the things that is today lacking in Islam in the West. That Muslims are fragmented, little islands in and unto themselves. The masjid is located one place and Muslims are scattered in many other places. Maybe a school is over there, or maybe not. Each individual is under constant attack from the environment around him. And in my estimation, from what I have observed here in North America and in Central America and the Muslim communities that are developing, until Muslims come to a realization of the necessity for hijrah within their communities or within their region, within their locales, wherein they can create real Muslim communities, living Muslim communities, according to the principles of Islam, then they will forever be plagued with the problems of that fragmentation. Families are individual families. What goes on in one family, nobody knows about. So, women may be oppressed, children may be abused, and it is not the concern of anybody else. Whereas in the Islamic community, it should be the concern of the whole community. And if the Muslims were living as a body, then it would be very difficult for an individual, for example, to abuse his wife and to abuse his child. Because whilst he's by himself in an apartment, or in a house, if he beats his wife and child and they scream, the neighbors will hear it. It's no big deal. They're hearing screams all the time. Screams are coming out of their homes. Right? Whereas if that individual was living now, that family existed within a Muslim community, a Muslim, your neighbors, if you hear it scream, you're running to the front door, banging on the door, what's happening? What's going on? So that individual, though he may have the desire to beat on his wife or to abuse his children, he wouldn't just out of the embarrassment. I mean, it's not to say that that's the best. I mean, he should not do it because he should feel it's wrong. But for the protection of the family, that physical community will provide a protection for them in this manner. by embarrassing that individual to not commit such crimes. And this also is essential for the children. Children now scattered all over the place. They don't have peer groups. If they get together in a masjid, the few children that come, some kids are real big, some are real small. They can't develop real friendships. Whereas in that physical community where the kids are interacting all the time, the friendships that are necessary, the new peer groups can be formed. Instead of the children being put under the pressures that exist in the public school systems. And as a result, we see with our own eyes a huge percentage of the Muslim children leaving Islam in droves once they graduate, or even before they graduate from the high school, junior high school systems. This is what we're plagued with. I know 15 years ago, when around the time when I accepted Islam, myself and other Muslim converts, we used to look at the immigrant Muslims and say, man, look at these people. They're out of it. Look at their kids, marrying non-Muslims and, getting into marijuana and all these other things, leaving Islam. But now, 15 years later, we turn around and see our own children doing the same thing. And it's up to us to stop that process. It is up to us to make the kind of sacrifices necessary to make Islam real on a societal basis. We can't use the methods of the Ansar, because those are prohibited methods. But what they have ended up with, the end result in the terms of that community, we need something which is similar. But because we don't have the kind of pressures that they have, then it requires more on the part of the individual. But the reality is that when people come together as a body, what you will find is that this will create in the individual a willingness to strive and to sacrifice that you will not find from that individual when he's on his own. Because when he's on his own with his wife and children, he's concerned about what's going to happen to my wife and kids. If I go do this, what's going to happen to my wife and kids? Who's going to look after my wife and kids? But when he is in that physical community where the bond is there, and he knows if he dies, something happens to him, that community is going to be there for his family, for himself and for his family, then that will give him the impetus to make the kind of sacrifices that we can't see today, that we know we need to establish Islam, but we can't find. People are not prepared to do it. Because that universal view of Islam, which requires the establishment of that universal community, is not a real part of the Muslim character. You see, we will still hear in people's talk, in their expressions, things which indicate nationalism, things which indicate racialism, and even tribalism. Tribalism for us is like you come from New Jersey and they come from New York. That's the tribalism version, right? You hear these kind of things still in people's speech. And the Prophet ﷺ had said, "Man da'a ila al-asabiyya falaysa minna." Whoever calls to this racialism, tribalism, nationalism is not of us. It is not a part and parcel of the Muslim character. He is international. He is not bound by any locality or by any racial group that he happens to be born in. He is a universal Muslim individual. The whole earth is his home. And wherever Islam can be established, wherever he can practice Islam, that's the place that he seeks. This is the universal outlook which Islam seeks to develop within the character of the believer. And what comes along with this universal outlook? Because when you're looking at people as people, you're not judging them according to narrow characteristics, it produces an individual who should be optimistic. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that. The believer is optimistic, he's not pessimistic. When he deals with people, he gives them the benefit of the doubt. He doesn't judge them criminals before he has dealt with them. And what this does, of course, is it removes from the heart of the individual suspicion. He's not a suspicious person by nature. But of course, this is the principle. This is the character of the Muslim, the true Muslim. But when you live in society in this fragmented form, where all the people around you, are not subscribing to these views, then you are obliged to become suspicious. You're obliged to be pessimistic. So this is why I'm saying that until that community is really formed, many of these characteristics, it will be very difficult for the individual to develop them. Very difficult. Because it's in that physical community where a person can develop the kind of optimism which comes from striving together with other peoples, making the similar sacrifices, going through the difficulties, getting the help of others and helping others. This is what now produces in that individual the kind of optimism which gives him the impetus now to really take Islam to the nation. So, in summary, we said that Islam goes beyond the rites and the rituals that we have learned. We need the rites and rituals because they are like the framework, the blueprint. But there is something which is supposed to come from those rites and rituals. And among those things is the evolution of the Muslim character. We come into Islam and we carry with us all of the characteristics that we had before Islam. And nobody expects a person to come into Islam and automatically, change. It comes with struggle, striving. So it means it's something we have to work on. It's not something which is automatic. It's true, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, Islam, the acceptance of Islam, wipes out what came before. It means that, you're clear of those things. Those things that you did before Islam, you're clear of them. But it doesn't mean that they're clear of you. They can become a part of you again once you do not deliberately attempt to change your character, to live the pillars of Islam in such a way that your character reflects the characteristics that Islam has enjoined on us through these fundamental pillars. So what I'm saying fundamentally is we have to get back to basics. It's good to increase our knowledge. We need to attend classes to increase our knowledge of Islam in general, to understand the workings of Islam in society on a international level, the problems that Muslims are facing, and all these different things. However, our success in this life will depend fundamentally on how successful we are in internalizing the basics. This is what our success depends on. Our ability to internalize, to make a part of our life, the basic principles which Islam teaches in the 5 pillars and in all the other aspects of the Islamic rites and rituals. And I would hope that inshallah we can take a step from here, a new step, a step forward, in which we will reanalyze ourselves in the light of the pillars of Islam, so that we may become the Muslim characters. We may display the Muslim characteristics that would have the kind of impact on the society and would produce the kind of Muslim communities that could make a difference in the flow of history in this part of the world. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.